Bob Ackerley has a lifelong interest in farming and producing healthy food. In 1999, Ackerley founded Rio Grande Organics and began acquiring pecan orchards in South Texas. Today, Rio Grande Organics farms over 3,000 acres of pecan trees and supplies organic pecans to customers that includes Whole Foods and supermarkets in Hong Kong. In 1984, Ackerley founded Smith & Associates, an independent distributor of semiconductors and other electric components. Today, Smith is the world's largest semiconductor broker, with offices in 14 cities throughout North America and Asia. Ackerley is a member of the Graceland Board of Trustees and is the great-great-grandson of Marietta Walker, one of Graceland's original founders. Please help me welcome Mr. Bob Ackerley.
Well, good morning, everybody. I don't know how I first speak to the microphone here in the leaves. First of all, I'd like to really take a moment to thank Jen for putting this together. You know, it's this is the first symposium here on sustainability at Graceland, and so I think everyone can take a little grace in knowing that you were the first one, and hopefully 10 years from now, at the 10th anniversary of this, you can say, I was there at the first one. And the believers are here today, you know, the small, but I'm sure this will grow every year. So when Jen asked me about she mentioned that she was thinking about putting this on during the trustees meeting in August. And I immediately said, you know, I'd love to come talk. I'd love the opportunity to talk about some of the things that I've done, because I have had a very long interest in sustainability and in organic farming. See, we get the. I did it. Okay. There we go. Technology. Thought I'd start with a quote from a president from Missouri, very, very intelligent guy in my book. He said, in the long view, no nation is healthier than its children, nor more prosperous than its farmers. That was about 70 years ago he said that. I think it was at the time he was signing the act for the National School Lunch Program. And I think those words have as much meaning today as they did 70 years ago. I think if Harry was here, he probably wouldn't be very happy looking at the state of the health of a lot of our children today. I live in a big city. I live in Houston, the nation's fourth largest city. And obesity among children is a huge problem today. And when we look at the state of farming and the state of our farmers, somehow it's been overlooked. I mean, everybody's interested in technology today and other things, and farming has kind of been passed over a little bit. And I think that's tragic. I think there's no doubt there's a huge connection between nutrition, healthy eating, and farming. And so, who am I? Who is Bob Ackerley? I was born and raised in New York City. That's where I grew up. And my great-grandmother was born right here in Lamoni, Iowa. She married and moved down the road to Leon, where my grandfather was born. My grandmother was born in Osceola, Iowa. She grew up on a farm there. My grandfather and grandmother met in 1929 in the Depression, and there were no jobs here. They wound up moving to New York, where my grandfather was an attorney for the government. But my grandmother, you could never take the Iowa farm out of her. She lived on a small plot of land in New York City, and every inch of that property was covered with plants, with things that were growing, that were producing food. I think the lot was only 40 by 90, so you imagine a small lot and a house on it, but over the driveway was a grape arbor, and she had currants growing and tomatoes, and all year round when I went to visit my grandmother, there was something growing. And once it was harvest season, things were canned and put in the basement. Her entire basement was canned vegetables because that's what she knew growing up. She lived to be 98 years old, healthy her whole life. I think that's a true testament to healthy living and the fact that she grew up on a farm. She ate good food her whole life, and so it made a huge impression on me. When I was 5 years old, my grandmother put me in the car and took me out to Osceola, Iowa for a summer. So imagine a 5-year-old kid from New York City who lands in Osceola, Iowa. We stayed with her sister Lena, who lived in Osceola, had a house, a huge garden on the side of the house. And every day we'd go out and pick something from the garden and eat it. Her brother had a farm outside of town, a farm with, he grew all sorts of different things. He grew beans, he grew corn, lima beans, it's not soybeans. They're all edible beans that he had out there. And wonderful experience for a 5-year-old. So my grandmother really imprinted on me the importance of farming and the rural lifestyle. And she knew what she was doing, as you'll see. She had a plan. I was trained as a chemical engineer. That's my background. Specifically, my area of expertise was in synthetic fuels development, which is kind of interesting stuff. I came out of college in the early 80s during the first oil crisis when the United States kind of got shut off, back to the addiction. Our dealer shut us off, and oil wasn't coming to the U.S. So there was a scramble to think of alternative ways that we could keep the oil and gas flowing. And there is a technology. People are always amazed, but there's a technology. You start with a lump of coal, and you can convert that to jet fuel, and that's kind of what I did. We designed plants to convert coal. The joke was that we were going to turn the state of Kentucky into jet fuel. That was basically the plan back then. But there was really a lesson to me in this, and that lesson was simply that we can do some things that are amazingly unsustainable. Okay, converting coal to jet fuel is this enormous industrial process. It requires a huge plant. My job, one of the things we did, we took coal to these plants in South Africa that have been doing this for the last 70 or 80 years and tested it. And it works. I mean, it's a technology that's out there. It's proven. But it's probably, again, not a good idea to take this huge amount of coal that's buried in the United States and turn it into jet fuel and gasoline and diesel fuel. Around about that time, the price of oil dropped, and so all of these ideas about synthetic fuels were put on the sideline. And I looked around. It was a time when the personal computer boom was just starting. And I was fortunate enough to get in the semiconductor business. Over the years, was involved with enterprise software and recently in the solar business. And so it's kind of been the bulk of my career in business has been in the technology sector. After a couple of years of working and building a business, I had some investment capital. And the first thing I wanted to do was get back to farming. That was my grandmother's imprint on me. And so I looked around on the Gulf Coast of Texas where I was living, and the big business down there is rice farming. Okay, so rice farming is kind of a miracle. I mean, it's just this amazing business when you're in it. First of all, it's a very productive crop. I'm still involved in rice farming. We were able to yield, typically we can yield something like 11,000 pounds of rough rice per acre. And it's just a tremendous amount of rice. And the equipment you work with. A rice combine is an incredibly complicated machine, very complex, just a marvel of engineering, and a testament to just the brilliance of the engineers in this country to design equipment like that. This thing just rolls through that field at 5 miles an hour and just, fills that hopper up, and, every 20 minutes an 18-wheeler is hauling rice off to the rice storage. When it came time to spray something today, we use an airplane. The airplane has the GPS coordinates of the field in it. We simply pick up the phone and say, field 7, spray it with this or do that. And that's it. This airplane knows exactly where it is, comes in. So it's really miraculous. I mean, just everything about rice and how productive it is. It just kind of was it's eye-opening how far we've come and how productive we can be in producing food. But there was something about it that just was not satisfying personally, okay? You're producing all this food, it goes to the local rice tower or rice gin, and that's it. You get a check in the mail, all right? You don't really connect with the people that are eating this food. And I got in the farming business to connect with people. I wanted to grow food that people were going to eat and kind of close that circle, so that I knew them. And one thing I learned is being in the technology business. We have all this wonderful technology, but for all the Facebook and Twitter, you don't really need that. You really need 3 meals a day. I mean, if you don't eat, we don't exist. And so it's a critical business, and I wanted to be connected. So what you learn over time is that somehow, somewhere, food became an equivalent of money. And that's the way I see it. That's the way I interpret it. There's a futures market for rice. There's a price. There's a market price, a world price for rice. And that's the price. If you grow rice this year, this is what they're paying. You can see it varies quite a bit. I don't know why. There's billions of people that are dependent on rice around the world. Most of our rice was exported to lots of the Middle East, a lot to Indonesia. But this price varied all the time. And, like I said, we were told, we get a price. We were a price taker in that business. We didn't have a local market. Rice is typically not part of the diet of America. It makes up a small part, but typically rice is exported. We actually send a lot of rice to Mexico also. But the interesting, what kind of fascinated me a little bit was learning about how food had become a commodity, okay? And that, there was a huge market of, we call them derivatives, futures, if you will, where people can go and speculate on when the price is going to go up or down. Supposedly, the idea is that, farmers can hedge their crop, but, it doesn't really work that way. I never met a farmer that got rich in the futures market, okay? There's, one issue with farming is that as a farmer, whether you're growing corn or soybeans or rice, you're always, to use the lingo, you're always long rice. And the best you can do is really hope to break even. But, the other side is a speculator, someone who's taking the other side of your bet. He doesn't have a position. He can go long or short. And what's very interesting when you study it, the original futures market was developed in Japan in 1700. Okay, so, for 300, 400 years, you've had this evolution. I'm sorry, my math is off. 300 years, this evolution of food becoming money and being an interchangeable commodity that was used for all sorts of things besides feeding people and nourishing people. We talk about this idea. I think this is really kind of helpful to understand how certain crops like corn, soybeans, rice, dominate a food system, okay? It starts with basic crop research. How do we make a better seed? How do we protect that plant while it's growing? So from all this research, from hundreds of universities and private research groups across the country, we get information, okay? And that information is, how do we do a better job? It's used by the seed and chemical industry to come up with more productive plants, with hybrids that have better characteristics for drought tolerance, for yield. I mean, in rice, the big thing is getting the plant to stand up, so it doesn't fall down in bad weather. From all of that comes new products that help farmers be more productive. And this is not to say, I'm not using this to say that it's bad or good. This is simply to show how the system works, okay? How certain crops just stay present and get bigger. As the yields increase, your food processors have more and less expensive product to work with. They generate a lot of money. It goes back to basic crop research. So this cycle just kind of repeats, and year after year, and so the entrenched stay entrenched. Now I'm going to talk about organic agriculture in a little bit, specifically organic pecans, and for us, this is the big challenge today. As a small industry, we just don't have this cycle working for us. We don't have the basic crop research necessary to solve a lot of the problems that we have and to make organic agriculture on par with conventional agriculture. Okay, people talk about organic is more expensive, it's not as productive. We don't know that. Okay, the reality is we don't have this cycle working for us today. And hopefully in the future we can get this cycle working for other crops and for organic food and be much more efficient than we are today. Let's talk about, through this process of being a rice farmer, I think people today have alluded to some of the issues with farming, with pesticides. I think, the event we usually point to is the publication in 1962 of Silent Spring, the first book that really talked about some of the environmental issues in the country, some of the problems with pesticides, and what it was doing to nature, okay? At Formula, that was very important in a lot of my thinking and why I wanted to kind of do something besides conventional agriculture, and how I came to be very interested in organic agriculture. I'd read these books and study it and kind of think about how farming had come to rely on so many pesticides and fungicides and herbicides in order to produce these bountiful crops that we have. Well, recently, most people have probably heard about CCD, colony collapse disorder, the problem with the bees. And this is the actual numbers right here. These are European honeybees, okay? What's fascinating is there's over 1,600 different species of bee and other pollinators that pollinate various plants. So not just the food we eat. I think people typically say 35% of the food that goes in your mouth started with a pollinator somewhere. Okay, that's the number you hear. But European bees are used in a lot of crops, but there's hundreds of other insects and bees that help to pollinate all the crops that we have. Okay, and what we know in the managed bee colonies is that starting somewhere around 2007 or 8, we started to see all of these problems with the honeybee colonies during the winter. They didn't overwinter; the colonies collapsed. Okay, and so this Bee Informed group has surveyed beekeepers over the years and tried to keep track and tried to measure the size of the issue. And you can see, they expect some losses every year. There's mites. There's a mite that's very specific to bees that are responsible for a lot of these bees dying and the colonies collapsing. But when they surveyed them, there were these unexplained losses. And as you can see, in the last couple of years, they expected the losses to run 15 to 17%, but the total losses for the year have run as high as 45 and 42%. I mean, these are alarming numbers. You know, when we can't keep bees healthy, when these colonies collapse because the bees fly off and don't come back, I mean, it's a huge problem. Many people have been working to understand, you know, what the cause of colony collapse disorder is. And you hear a lot of different things we point to. The fact that bees get transported every year in trucks out to California to pollinate the almonds. That creates a lot of stress on them. But the research in the last couple of years has really focused in on a class of pesticides called neonicotinoids, okay? And the best evidence is that these neonicotinoids, or neonics for short, are what's causing the problem with the bees. The neonics are used to control aphids in conventional agriculture. They're very effective. They've always been touted and thought to be very safe, not harmful to other insects. But the truth is now that they didn't kill the bees, right? The bees don't die when they get near a field that's been sprayed with the neonics, but their nervous system has been disrupted. And because of that, over their lifetime, the colony collapses. Bulletin of Insectology. This is the paper published in 2014, scientists from the Harvard School of Public Health. Their study points to the neonicotinoids as being the cause of the problems with the bees. This is a 2014 study. These three scientists originally came out with a study in 2012. Well, you can imagine there was quite a bit of controversy about their study, how they had done it. A lot of the people that make these neonics are big corporations, so they worked very hard to discredit the study. Well, Lou and his associates went back and redid it. They've done the study. It's not a very complicated study, but it proves pretty conclusively that the exposure to the neonics is one reason why these colonies collapse. So, you know, once again, we have a lot of challenges. And, you know, the challenge is that we have 7-8 billion people in the world to feed. Conventional agriculture produces a tremendous amount of food and keeps people alive. But we can't go on when we're doing things that destroy or disrupt the bees. I mean, it's that simple. We depend on pollination. You know, it's a service that's out there. In my process of trying to figure out what to do and where I wanted to go, I came across this book written in 1953. After World War II, obviously there's been a lot of destruction throughout Europe and the Far East, and the world was in pretty bad shape. The U.S. Department of Agriculture sent this Russell Smith and two other colleagues around to do a survey around the whole globe about the potential for tree crops, okay, and to specifically find trees that had potential to be a permanent agriculture. You know, tree crops, I'm in the pecan business, is a very recent phenomenon. I mean, it started in Georgia in the 20s, maybe 10 years before that, but it's really a very recent thing, using permanent crops where trees were planted, in the United States anyway. And so Russell went around the earth and surveyed, you know, and there was some farming of chestnuts in Europe that's been going on for a couple hundred years, but it was really to just go find all the potential trees that could be used as a permanent agriculture. And one of the other big problems at that time was erosion, okay, soil erosion, just plowing up the earth. And so they wanted to, the idea was to be able to plant something that could be put in the ground permanently, provide food for humans, potentially be a source of food for animals, and stop all of this soil erosion that was occurring all across the United States. And I came across this book and read it, and it's just a testament to how much wisdom is out there. We just have to open our eyes sometimes and look and go read. You know, a lot of this work has been done for us, okay? We're not going to invent the future. I think, to a large degree, a lot of this wisdom and knowledge is out there. We just have to go rediscover it. So, in reading this book, well, I kind of came in on the idea of pecans. He talks about pecan growing as one of the, certainly one of these crops that could be grown permanently. And I said, okay, I'm in. It was like he was talking to me through the book. You know, he just, his voice came through, and I said, all right, this is what I want to do. I want to be in the pecan business. And that time, it wasn't just a sense of being in the pecan business, but when I looked at the pecan business, it's conventional agriculture to a large degree. And what I decided, what I knew is that I wanted to do this organically, right? And nobody else was doing it organically. There were a couple of guys, very small scale, in down on the border with Mexico, that were doing organic pecan farming. Okay, but it was small scale. I met these guys and talked to them. I said, hey, this is a great crop, and there's got to be a way to scale this up. So, through a slide here about organic farming, I think this first point is the most important one: an ecological production system that promotes and enhances biodiversity, biological cycles, and soil biological activity. And that really kind of encapsulates it. I mean, what you're trying to do in organic farming is create a healthy soil, okay? So that you're not relying entirely on synthetic fertilizer to provide nutrients to the plant, pesticides to kill off any insect that tries to come on the plant, and fungicides to kill off any disease. You know, the idea is that if the soil is healthy, the plant will be healthy also and be very productive. Minimizing the use of off-farm inputs is a goal of organic farming. Of course, that's tough. No one is really there yet. And the last point, you know, it's food grown without synthetic pesticides or fungicides. There's no GMOs allowed in organic farming and no chemical fertilizer. This is the pecan farm. This is the orchard in Crystal City, Texas. I got involved in this farm about 14 years ago. It was already in existence. In other words, the trees were mature. The trees are today, they're about 35 years old. And it was conventionally farmed. So we stepped in and over a 3-year period converted from conventional agriculture to organic agriculture. What's funny about being in the pecan business is some people often think that you have these trees out there that produce pecans, and you go out there at harvest time and pick the pecans up and take the money in the bank, and you know, it's a year-round job to take care of those trees. We have about 20 employees. For example, in the winter months, the 3 months of the winter, we go through and spend 3 months pruning the trees. We keep them about 42 feet tall, we have to prune both sides of the trees. We have to prune between the trees. It's very important to keep these trees managed in size. If you let the pecan trees go, they'll grow to be a huge tree. They'll grow to be 100 feet tall, 120 feet, and then you can't manage it. Not only you can't manage the tree, they shade out everything else. And once they start to shade each other, they stop producing pecans. So for 3 months, we do nothing but go through cut limbs and keep the pecan trees in shape. In 2000, the USDA passed the final rule on the National Organic Program. This has actually been set in motion in 1990. There was an act of Congress that said, okay, let's figure out what the rules should be for organic agriculture. It took 10 years to come up with the National Organic Program, which is a set of legal mandates on who can actually, what you can do and still call your produce or product organic, okay? And the reason this was necessary is because everybody had different ideas about what should be allowed in organic farming, in terms of what you could spray, what you could use for fertilizer. I think this has probably been one of the single most important parts of the organic program, was to come up with a set of standards and say, okay, these are the rules. This is what you have to do in order to be able to label something as organic, okay? And from the consumer's point of view, it's very helpful because this label means that whoever puts this label on their food has followed these protocols. They've followed the rules, and they have, it's a common set. So even if the food is imported from somewhere else, they have to follow the National Organic Program. As I go through farmers markets, which I frequently do whenever I'm traveling, I'll see people with signs that, they say, well, this is sustainably grown or this is naturally grown. And the truth is, it doesn't really tell you much. Because they can do whatever they want. I've come across people that say, well, we don't spray pesticides, but then it turns out they use a fungicide. They spray some type of fungicide on their crop, or they use synthetic fertilizer, or they use herbicide. They use Roundup because it's easy to kill weeds, but if you're in the organic program, you obviously cannot use Roundup. You can't use synthetic herbicides. And that's what people want. The people that buy organic food want food that's grown this way, okay? It's a market. This is not mandated by the government. This is mandated by the people. And, today, throughout the United States, the organic market is growing. I hear all different numbers, maybe 20%, 25% a year, but still a tiny percent of the food supply in this country. It's 2 or 3% of our food is certified organic. But I think it's critical that we maintain the organic standard, because if you don't have this standard, what you're going to get is people doing whatever they want to do and calling it organic. And then you as a consumer just don't really know how it's done. And so I think this is really has been a very important part of how the organic movement has been able to grow. And people dispute this. Unfortunately, I did hear this morning, we do pay for the certification. And they've tried to do things to bring down that cost of certification for smaller producers. But, if you don't have a process and a program, what you get is anarchy. What you get is kind of everybody doing their own thing and calling it organic, and that doesn't help. I think the spectrum, in the organic spectrum today, small, large, and lifestyle. This lifestyle is interesting. Permaculture, I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but permaculture is something that's growing pretty rapidly. It is more of a lifestyle than a commercial enterprise. But among younger people, there's quite a bit of interest in permaculture today. I think it's small scale, being 5 to 30 acres. Typically on these smaller operations, people will have plants and animals. They'll raise multiple different crops. But understand that on a small scale, raising 6 or 7 different crops at the same time is a management challenge. It's not easy. There's a lot to be learned about how to run even a small-scale organic operation. And a great opportunity, of course, is in artisanal processing today, taking some of these products from small organic farms and canning them or converting them into some kind of consumer product that people want. And then you move up to large scale. And typically, my experience with large scale organic farming is that it's one crop, or it's a cow operation or an organic chicken operation. So, as it's scaled up, I haven't come across many operations that are big that have been able to integrate different plants and animals. And that's really the goal, and I'll get to that in a minute. But again, it's just a management of learning how to manage all this, and the fact that so much of organic agriculture is a recent phenomenon. This is it's a concept that I think is really important in agriculture, what we call vital farmland. And what that means is that you have to have the right place to grow a certain crop, okay? Or put the right type of an organic operation in place. Earlier today, somebody was mentioning CSA's Community-Supported Agriculture, which is a great option for a small organic producer, somebody on 5 to 30 acres. And then have a subscription to have 300 or 400 people that are on your route and you deliver vegetables to. But the challenge is, if you put a CSA out in some rural area, you're not going to have that population of people that you need. So you really need an area that's close to a city or suburban area to put a CSA into practice. In our case, vital farmland meant being next to a river, and that's actually a Google Earth shot of our pecan farm in Crystal City, Texas. We're right on the Nueces River there, and that land next to the river is a critical place. Pecans need a deep soil. This is just a absolutely perfect place to grow pecans, okay? If you go 2 miles either way, away from that, the pecans wouldn't grow. So in thinking about, where, if you're going to get involved in agriculture, where you do it, the ground you pick is a critical factor in your success. It's the happiest moment every year in spring. The trees put the nutlets out, and it's a very hopeful sign. It's a sign of spring for us. This is typically in April. But it's our job to keep those nuts healthy for the next 6 months, And over 6 months, lots of things can happen. Insects, with disease, with predators. So it's really a job to get those nuts from this nutlet stage to, healthy, fully developed nuts. But again, spring, and it's a very hopeful sign. And there are some years when we go out there and we don't have this. The trees, some years, very disappointing, but they don't bear. And it's called alternate bearing. It's a big problem in pecan farming. And it's a long year when you don't have nutlets. In our organic agriculture, we still have a lot of challenges. This is a pest problem called the black aphid. And the black aphid chews on the leaf of a pecan tree. And as it chews on it, it has certain enzymes in its mouth that cause the leaf to die, and so the tree defoliates, okay? And it's a big problem for us because once that tree defoliates, we can lose the crop. It's a stress on the tree. And oftentimes the trees will not come back the next year with a crop because of black aphid damage the year before. Black aphids also have an exponential growth rate. When that black aphid is born, inside of it actually has 200 to 300 nymphs that are alive. And when that thing dies, breaks open, here comes 300 black aphids. So your population explodes incredibly fast once you get them in there. And we really don't have a good way to control this. I mean, we've had some methods over the years where we can have some control, but generally they reproduce so quickly that you get black aphids that are resistant to whatever you're doing to control them in organic agriculture. And so we've had some control over time, but it's been an ongoing problem for 15 years that we haven't solved yet. We use a lot of beneficial insects to try and control the black aphids. So instead of spraying a pesticide, we put another insect called the green lacewing out in the orchard to eat the black aphids. And we actually put pieces of paper out that have the eggs on them. And so the green lacewing eggs hatch, and they go and they just start eating the black aphids. So it's a biological control instead of a synthetic chemical control. It's an interesting story. We have a guy in our neighborhood down there in Texas that raises insects. His business was producing a parasitic wasp that is used in the cattle business. And he had a pretty good business raising these wasps. So we went to him and we said, look, we need these green lacewings. Can you rear these eggs for us so that we can put them out in the orchard? And so he started doing that and trying to raise these. He got very successful at it. And he's actually built a huge business now. He exports green lacewing eggs all over the world to people. It was a small business. And so it's just, to me, a great example of the opportunities in organic farming. I probably should have gotten the green lacewing business because he's doing great right now, and I'm still dealing with the black aphid. But he's built a huge business, and so just, as you think about agriculture and where the opportunities are, it may be in something that's related to what you're doing. Picture of, this is the young trees. We've been planting many trees in all of our orchards in South Texas now. These trees are about 4 years old. This picture was taken a couple of years ago. Those trees are 6 or 7 years old today. They're still 2 years away from bearing. So it really speaks to one of the challenges in tree crops, okay, in getting into permanent agriculture. It's an 8-year cycle, 8 to 9 years of time and energy and investment before you're going to get to a crop, before you're going to have something that's producing. But I think of it this way, all of us in the room, have an opportunity, maybe not to do something for ourselves, but just as we support Graceland and we educate the next generation of citizens of the United States, we're planting trees for the next generation to eat. We're planting and creating healthy food for our children and grandchildren to come. So mentally, that's kind of the model that I use. And one of it's a picture. Everyone always wonders, how do you harvest pecans? People go out there and pick them up. Again, back to the miracles of engineering in this country. This is a mechanical harvester. It's a tree shaker. And what that machine does, it goes up and has kind of an arm like a big lobster. It grabs a tree and for 20 seconds shakes the living heck out of it. And everything in that tree comes down on the ground, including every once in a while a beehive that'll be up in the tree will come down and send everybody running away. But, you know, as I think about agriculture moving forward, I don't think we're going back to the past and going to hand labor and having people go out. I mean, you know, pecans used to be harvested by hand. People would go out, pick them up, and fill buckets. And, you know, we're not going to go back to that. But, and so equipment like this is critical to what we do and to being able to produce food on a large scale. And I think we're very fortunate that we have a great industry in this country of agricultural implements and designing equipment. And there are many challenges, you know, and to this day, there's no mechanical picker for oranges. I mean, every orange you eat was hand-picked. There's no machine that can do that. So, you know, you have scientists that are trying to come up with machines that can harvest citrus, but to this day we don't have it. This is the orchard in winter, and I put this picture in to show everyone the no green up in the tree, but plenty of green down on the ground. And this is one of the tenets of organic agriculture, is using cover crops. The cover crops here are a type of clover that we grow, we plant, it reseeds heavily. What this clover does is it naturally fixes nitrogen into the ground. So it takes nitrogen out of the atmosphere and fixes it down into the ground. So our trees get 1/3 of their nitrogen every year from this cover crop. Okay, so we don't have to, you know, people talk about using synthetic fertilizer, which is, you know, a mainstay of conventional agriculture. And a lot of that nitrogen actually, you know, runs off, goes into the rivers, it goes down to the Gulf of Mexico and creates that dead spot. But, you know, we're using a cover crop. It's a very important part of keeping that soil healthy and active and providing nitrogen for those trees so they can produce a crop. You also see in this picture, you can see some of the pruning on the trees. They've just been cut there where those cuts are. So, shows you a lot of what life on a pecan orchard is like. This is what you hope to see at the end of the year. This means you can come back next year and do it again. Those are the trailers with the pecans drying. They're air dried, and I just put this picture in, just really kind of, just as a visual clue, just to show you what, you know, what we're able to do, and very productive orchards down here. In a good year, maybe we're going to produce organically 1,500 pounds to the acre, 1,400 pounds of pecans to the acre. In conventional, it's probably 40% more than that, 40 to 50% higher than that. So we have a long way to go to make organic agriculture as efficient as conventional agriculture. What are the challenges for us? Well, one of the things we talk about today in organic agriculture is closing the loop. I mentioned before, you know, we don't want to bring material from off the farm onto the farm, okay? And we have to we use a lot of poultry litter to fertilize the trees. So one of our ideas is to actually integrate some type of a chicken operation with the tree operation, so that the waste and the fertilizer from the chickens would be used to fertilize the trees. We use a tremendous amount of fossil fuel to run the equipment, to run irrigation, and we really need to find a way to reduce that fossil fuel usage on the farm. That's a challenge not just for us, but that's a challenge in all agriculture today. You know, there isn't practically any farming except very small-scale farming that doesn't use a lot of fossil fuels in some form, whether it's natural gas that is being used to make urea, that's a fertilizer, or diesel fuel for the equipment. So we all need to reduce it. We're looking at installing a solar PV system to power our irrigation pumps. And this last one is kind of interesting. This is back to an idea that's been done in Europe for a couple hundred years, where you use the trees and you have a mixed tree system to directly feed animals underneath the trees, okay? So they use chestnuts, mulberries, and a bunch of other trees, oaks, hickories, that actually grow and drop their produce, their fruit to the ground. The animals eat it. And it's an interesting idea. It's actually a delicacy in Europe to have pork that was raised under chestnut trees. We suffered a huge drought, 7 years. This picture is worth 1,000 words. Now, as we talk about the impact of climate change and what it does, there's a very real impact. We suffered through 7-8 year drought. It started raining over the last 18 months. This El Nino has been bringing a lot of rain back into our area, but the drought was devastating. I mean, it's simply, probably the worst drought ever, worse than the drought in the 50s. It just simply stopped raining. And this is an area right near the farm in the Nueces River watershed. And you can just see, the 80-90% of the trees were killed in the drought. Go back to that. I don't know that picture. Just a couple of quick ideas before I close out here on some of the things that are being done. There was a picture here. Up in Michigan now, people are very interested in bringing chestnuts back. Okay, they're on their 3rd generation of what they call chestnut farming up there, using different hybrids. And the number of people have been working for the last 35 years. The chestnut was everywhere in America up until about 100 years ago, and a terrible blight killed most of the chestnuts in this country. Chestnut, of course, is a delicious nut. And for the last 30 years, people have been working with hybrids and certain chestnut trees that they found that were resistant to the blight to bring it back. So in Michigan today, you have something like 50 or 60 farms that are growing chestnuts and trying to find what we call a genius tree, or one tree that's capable of becoming a parent to many other trees, that's resistant to the blight, that's highly productive, and that you could build an industry around. And so that's going on in Michigan. In Missouri, you have pecan growers in Missouri. There's a variety of pecan called the northern pecan. There's 6 or 7 growers in Missouri that are organic. They have a co-op, certified organic. A number of the restaurants in Kansas City have organic pecans on their menu that come from the Missouri pecan growers. So, hopefully, if somebody gets motivated here or is interested in tree crops, just realize it's going on around here. It's not just something in the southern part of the country. For organic agriculture, for sustainable agriculture to grow, we need investors. We need people that are interested in this. It's not going to happen by itself. And to kind of echo Leon's words of mindfulness, I like to say this: if you want change, be the change. Okay? And we need pioneers. We need people to kind of pick this up and get involved in organic farming and look at these crops. As people go to more of a plant-based diet, there's wonderful opportunities to grow beans, to grow organic beans, and grow them on a large scale. Hazelnuts are being grown in the central part of the country now, not just in Oregon. There's an opportunity there. In organic almonds and pecans, the opportunity is unlimited. I mean, we grow, there's a couple of organic pecan growers. We can't even come close to meeting the demand that there is for organic pecans today. I mean, there's pretty much unlimited demand. Unfortunately, there's an 8-year cycle to bring more product to the market, to grow more. But even in organic almonds, there's unlimited demand today. The people that are in that, I know people in that business, they can't come close to supporting demand. So that's right now. I mean, those markets exist. You know, that's there. You know, on the other side, I have, you know, what I call the future. You know, certain crops that show huge promise. Black walnut, hickory have been around for a while. Persimmons being grown. You saw what happened with pomegranates. Who ate pomegranates? No one ate them. And now, people have realized it's very high in antioxidants. The pomegranate is a crop that, 10 years ago, no one knew what it was. Today, it's very much out there in commerce and trade. People drink pomegranate juice. The pawpaw, which has been studied for a number of years, there is no commercial pawpaw production in the U.S., but the pawpaw is actually higher in antioxidants than pomegranates. Okay, so a huge opportunity again for someone, to get involved and pick it up. The last one I have on there is Pongamia, which is a tropical tree from Australia that has an amazing nut, very high in oil, very high oil content. And so there's some people now down in Florida growing a Pongamia, looking at that as a potential fruit crop. Last shot here. It's kind of my world now. Out in West Texas, we're planting more pecans. This is last December. Planting an orchard out in West Texas in a good area, again, vital, good, surprisingly good water, very good soil. And December 1st, we'll be back down there putting in another 10,000 trees. And that's some of the trees down there in West Texas. That's their second year. So 8 years, we'll be hopefully harvesting pecans. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed the talk.